back to anyone who's joined us on past sessions, and welcome to anyone who's joining for the first one today. Really excited for the conversation with Liam, Gary, and Amy. This is webinar number 5 of the series already. It's flying past, and this is the Building an Enterprise Level System with Xero series presented by CFO Tech Stack. My name is Jack Teal. I am the APAC commercial lead at Mayday. We're on a mission to mend month end for larger Xero businesses, beginning with the needs of those who are multi-entity. We're dealing with intercompany recharges, cross-entity bank recs, keeping intercompany loans in balance, all that annoying stuff that you got to deal with at the end of the month. As a little background on me personally, I started my career as an accountant with PwC about 10 years ago now, where I completed my chartered. I then worked as an advisor to SMEs, to SMBs, and I've spent the last 5 years working in a variety of different roles, in different startup roles as part of the Xero ecosystem. With all that experience, knowing Xero really well, I'm still as passionate as ever and as bullish as ever about the strength of Xero as a platform, as an accounting platform, but also as a platform to build upon as a broader business. It's great to see so many large businesses on the platform as well. We've seen over the last 10, 15 years, businesses start on Xero as a small business, they grow up, they become multi-entity, multifaceted, multinational, more complex, and they're still finding ways to survive and scale and grow with Xero as the foundation. Unfortunately, what's clear is that the content for those of you who are dealing in that space, who are running those finance teams, is lacking a little bit. So really thrilled to be able to put this series together and have these sessions where we can dive deeper into the space. So thanks to CFO Tech Stack for organizing it. I'm going to pause here and let our awesome panelists introduce themselves so that you know who's talking. Gary, if I can hand over to you first, go for it.
Thanks, Jack. Hi, everyone. My name's Gary. I am, well, you can read it there. I'm head of sales for the APAC region at Lightyear. Don't let that put you off. I'm not a real bullish sales guy, okay? My background is hospitality, retail operations, to be honest. We're here to talk scaling up multi-entity. I am all over that, even before my time at Lightyear. I love a good process, and I probably love a good process improvement even more. I did say to Jack beforehand, I am quite ill at the moment, so I'm going to try not to cough as much as I can. But if I go on mute, weirdly, that's why.
Awesome. Cheers, Gary. I'll hand over to Amy, who's joining us on her birthday. So thanks, Amy, for making the time.
Thanks, Jack. Thank you. I'm Amy. I'm the founder of Amy Who. We're a virtual support services to businesses around Australia. We offer a variety of things, and anything from financial reporting, bookkeeping, forecasting, virtual CFO, but all from the comfort of our house. So yeah, thanks.
Awesome. Thanks, Amy. Liam, over to you.
Hey, I'm Liam from Project Alfred. Similar to Amy, probably in what we do, kind of provide that outsourced finance function to businesses, and yeah, been working and loving with Xero on Xero for the last probably 10, 12 years. So
cool. Nothing like underselling yourselves, guys. Thanks for joining us. You all do amazing things, I know, and have a lot to add to the conversation today. So in terms of the conversation we're having, just to set the scene a little bit more, and if you've come to these sessions, you've heard this before, but if you're new, basically, I just want to kind of call out that, you know, as working at Mayday, we're dealing with larger Xero businesses, and we're often hearing from our customers that they've got a couple of questions on their mind. One is Xero still the right system for me? And if it is, how long is that going to remain the case before I have to start worrying about this whole ERP journey? We want to help answer those questions, and as part of answering them, you know, we know that the ERP move is horrible and hectic, quote unquote, from someone that we've spoken to, one of our customers. And that's before you deal with the costs, the implementation costs, and then find out that 58% of these ERP implementations fail anyway. So we're seeing a lot of reverse implementations. We're seeing a lot of people move back from ERP to Xero and having success as well. And I think a big part of that is actually something that someone mentioned in a couple of sessions ago, is that the ecosystem keeps growing. So what was there 5 years ago, and maybe the pains that weren't being solved, may now be solved. So I think we're seeing a little bit of a change of pace. We're seeing a lot of larger Xero businesses succeeding, but at the same time, we don't want to, overcorrect and pretend that Xero is right for every business in every stage. So we want to make sure that we're we're clear on where that line is and where it might be time to actually look outside and look to those ERPs as well. So yeah, looking forward to the conversation around the strengths and limitations of Xero. In terms of the specific agenda, we want to delve really deep into what Xero does well as a platform for AP. We want to then speak to the challenges that you're going to begin to experience or that you may already be experiencing as you begin to grow your team and business on Xero. We're then going to discuss the ecosystem, what you can get out of an AP tool. So what does that encompass? How can you leverage that? What are the benefits of that? And then we're going to touch on when an ERP might be the only solution. What are we seeing out there in the market within our clients and customers who are working on an ERP? Why is that for them? Why is Xero not working out for that size business? After that, we'll go into a couple of top tips, Q&A, all of that kind of stuff. So I hope that all makes sense. If you've been on these before, it'll go pretty quickly. So yeah, let's jump right in. Amy, I want to throw to you first, if I can, to kind of give a broad introduction to, number one, what are the general needs of a business when it comes to accounts payable, probably at that smaller end of town as we're getting started on Xero, and what does Xero do really well when it comes to AP?
Yeah, of course, Jack. I think the key considerations for any business, small or large, when it comes to AP is to determine, the existence of the AP in the first place and making sure that they're recorded in the correct accounting period. So you'd need a reliable system to track and show what's outstanding at any given time and being able to see a snapshot of what's owed to any supplier or vendor.
Cool, no worries. And I mean, Liam, hearing that, is there anything else that stands out from your perspective that Xero does really well in those early stages?
I think it gives you a very good, like once all the information's in there, the actual overview of it is quite simple, but enough to understand at a glance like what you owe, who you owe, and you can do it, like pay things quite nicely if it's domestic and you're starting off small and out of kind of batch payments and ABA files, like that's done as efficiently as it needs to be.
Yeah, I mean, we're coming from a world, imagining pre-Xero with none of the ability to set up templates and set up automations and set up, workflows. I appreciate that Xero sits within a certain phase of that growth journey. So as you get bigger and as you start to experience, I suppose, more complexity, you're dealing with more suppliers, maybe your team's bigger. What are those key challenges or pain points that you're going to first begin to see? So yeah, Liam, just back to you on that. Like where do you start to get the growing pains with Xero?
I think the first thing is like you pretty quickly have a need for like any kind of OCR receipt capture, because Xero's mail-in is not good. It captures like the date, and that's pretty much it. And so that's not a hard add-on, because it is an easy workflow to you're not really changing a huge amount. And so as soon as you start getting more and more, that data entry becomes time consuming and cumbersome. So that's kind of the first thing. And then I'd say probably the next thing is if you're doing a lot of international payments or a lot of BPay, using them straight out of Xero can be frustrating as well.
Okay, and so if you've got, if you're in need of something to do OCR, if anyone's listening in today who's not doing that or not automating that process at the moment, what are the go-to areas, any specific tools that you often work with?
So there's obviously Lightyear. We also work with Dext and Hub comes free with Xero, but I would argue is not necessarily as good as the others. Yeah. So they're probably the key ones that I'm playing.
Cool. I mean, Amy, from your side, hearing what Liam's kind of talking about there regarding growing pains, or I suppose the trigger points for maybe needing to look at something to bolt on to Xero. What are those key areas you see or hear from your own clients that are like, hey, we're beginning to feel some pain in this spot? What are those drivers?
Usually, like Liam said, it's time consuming. And then obviously the amount of exports that you're able to do at any given time through Xero really slows things down as well. I think it's about 200 records per batch file or something that you can do. So for larger companies, if they've got more AP, then if they've got more than 200 to pay in their monthly cycle or their fortnightly cycle, that really slows things down as well.
Yeah, okay, that's really good point. So Gary, you deal with this on a regular basis. So to Liam and Amy's points, number one around what Xero does well, and perhaps, I guess from your side, where would maybe a customer come to you and you might say, actually, you probably don't need something yet. You can do a lot of this and achieve quite a good outcome just with Xero. And then what are those pain points? It could be what Liam and Amy are saying. It could be something else in addition.
I would say another important bit from what Amy and Liam have shared is, yes, it's great to save the data entry and like that pain, right? But it's also the visibility on approvals, right? As soon as you've got 1,000 docs a month across different retail stores or hospitality venues, or it could just be multiple offices in different suburbs, regions, whatever, from multiple people that come and look at Lightyear, like, we're not just the data extraction piece like those mentioned by Liam. It's the approvals piece is probably the bigger like sell point, I suppose, or point of interest, right? We look at the stats on people finding us, and it's people Googling approval software, that sort of thing. And with that, if I'm not being clear what I mean by approvals, it would be like before it gets to Xero by Liam's team, Amy's team, whatever, there's generally, in a paper trail world, not any visibility on what invoices there are, whether they're good to pay, whether they're accurate, right? Tools like a Lightyear or, an approval, that it basically just keeps that, not just an audit trail, but you can see what's still coming, right? They can see that Amy's not ready to approve that invoice that's come through, but they know that it's there and that cost is coming. And that gives you an incredible amount of foresight, I think. And that's as much coming from me here in my Lightyear t-shirt as back in my hospitality retail days. Like, it was an absolute game changer to actually just see that stuff and not be fumbling paper around and losing things and all of that stuff, right?
And I mean, I'm coming from a place without as much experience as yourself and the rest of you in this area, but I know I was just sitting down with one of our customers the other day talking about the time that they were spending, the 55 entity group on Xero. That's, each of their stores is one entity. They're getting statements, they're comparing statements, and this is like a 2 to 3 day, or was a 2 to 3 day process at the end of month end. So what I think something also that's kind of come to the fore from the conversations we've been having across this series is, if you've been doing something for so long, it becomes, in a way, that's my job. Like the 3 days I spend at month end doing that comparison of statements or to input that data from those invoices and bills. That's my job. So I don't see it as a problem. It's not a pain point. So how do you, I suppose, if people are listening in, reset that mindset almost around looking at something not as a job to be done? I suppose it is a job to be done, but there is a pain there, or is it just the job? How do you have those conversations?
I hear this day in, day out. Like, even a demo this morning with an insurance company. Like, they probably don't need all the bells and whistles that a big enterprise app like Lightyear does. But it was, again, the approvals piece that they were looking for. You're talking about statements, Jack. Like, for those that don't know, that's a pretty big feature in what we do, in that Lightyear's extraction is a bit different. We don't really rely on OCR and stuff like a lot of the other tools do. Our IP behind the product is more accurate. So we get like line item detail from invoices. But with that, back to your statement point, Jack, we can extract the lines and invoice numbers and things from a statement. And then Lightyear can match up all of that with the bills that are in that account. So even while you're in Lightyear, which essentially sits in front of a Xero, you can make sure everything's matched, nothing's missing, request what is missing, perhaps, again, long before it even hits hit Xero. And it's, while we're talking multi-entity, yeah, like if you're doing statements for 50 entities, individual entities, and there are gaps and things, like 3 days, I'd say, is being quite polite if you've got a lot of suppliers. But the ecosystem with features like that through Lightyear, yeah, we give a 50 entity group using Xero or whatever software, they'd easily get a week back at month end just by managing to maintain that throughout the month. Like, Amy, you're nodding your head. I know that some of your clients are sort of fans of this.
Yeah, it'd be great to hear, Amy, like if you've actually got a specific situation that you can kind of refer to, because I think for anyone listening, it always hits home a little bit better when it's about someone specific. So yeah, it'd be great to hear who you've solved this problem for.
I was agreeing with what Gary was saying. The time that we've gotten back with just what he was referring to on statement matching at the end of month is just been amazing, because it's matching as it's going through. So our clients who use it are getting so much more time back for end of month, that they're able to have more transparency across where everything is sitting for AP. And that's really important when it comes to multi-entity clients and people who are using Xero. Having that transparency is been really amazing.
Yeah, awesome. I mean, Liam, I'm keen to get your perspective too. If we kind of look at that broader third agenda point there around how the ecosystem can help. Obviously, we're hearing a little bit about what Lightyear can do, but I mean, the ecosystem's a lot broader. I mean, there's a lot of nuance and a lot of detail in every business and the solutions that they need. Some products can handle a lot of different scenarios, and sometimes there's a really niche solution just for a particular use case. So, I mean, how do you kind of go about that, or can you share a story from a experience you've had with a particular client that's come to you with some issues around AP and how you went about solving it with the ecosystem?
Yeah. So I think probably the biggest change we had for a particular client was that they had about 5 entities, and they were doing a lot of international stuff. They had kind of payments all over the place using traditional banks. We had already implemented Dext with them, but then from the kind of payments and approval side, we then set them up on another app in the ecosystem that pulled all the invoices in for payments. They had whatever approval workflow that they wanted. There's a bunch of different things that you could do, but then the payments were also in there as well. So they had that kind of full visibility of seeing and approving the payments as they were going, could flick between the entities, and not like, I guess before that they were a bit all over the place, and as they were growing, kind of just needed to change. I guess it took a bit to get them to change, but yeah, once they did it and kind of worked it all out, it was good.
Even the reporting in the ecosystem, there are tools out there that like can arrange a lovely polished dashboard of the 50 Xero using entities in a group and pull all of that sales information or costs and like all of that and make it very clear too. Like there's really like the phrase, there's an app for that, is never been more relevant. I think now that Xero's just cleared 1,000 apps, like there's literally something out there that can replace whatever spreadsheets you're collating at the end of the month. Yes, okay, but you could look at it as it's another subscription, but none of the ecosystem would exist if we were more expensive than what you're doing now, right?
Yeah.
I mean, and this has been very topical, I suppose, in all of the conversations we've been having around the ERP Xero conversation, because number one, there's a little bit of a myth or misconception that you can't grow to a certain size on Xero, and I think Xero would be the first to admit that their marketing probably doesn't help that. It does say for small businesses on the website, but it is a foundational tool that can grow. It's about just making sure that you're putting the right data in Xero and then leveraging the ecosystem where you can. But from an ERP side, it's not necessarily actually a better outcome for you either. Or it's not just a cost thing. It's not just to say, oh, ERP would be great, but it's really expensive and it's going to be a really time-consuming project. for some businesses, it's not a better outcome. You may actually get a better solution by leveraging these 3 or 4 core add-ons that are specialists in what they do and do it extremely, extremely well, versus an ERP that's trying to do everything. And it comes back to that best of breed versus all-in-one debate, which will always be around. I think the world goes in mountains and valleys, and it's all in one day, and then it's let's break it apart and do a best of breed the next day. So I mean, in terms of that discussion around the scale at which you can achieve just with Xero, and I appreciate it's a broader discussion that goes beyond just AP here, but if we've kind of focused the lens around AP, how far can you go? We've spoken about 55 entities, but that's just a pure number of entities. I'm sure there's other elements here around complexity, being multinational, having remote workers, different challenges that you get as you grow. So, I mean, Amy, can you pick out, can you think of a business that's been able to kind of really scale up on Xero and make it work thanks to the ecosystem?
Yeah, of course. I've got a like I was saying before, I've got a multi-entity hospitality business. They've got nine different venues here around Perth and continue to grow. And as we were talking on before, end of month was time consuming, paper invoices, all that sort of stuff. So we've reached out to the ecosystem. We use the ecosystem, some ecosystem apps specifically, obviously Lightyear, in helping to obviously speed that up, streamline the AP across all the board. So we use all of that. It's less time consuming. It's got more visibility for the client. He can log into the into Lightyear and see everything across all of the different entities at one time. The approval process, like Gary was saying before, has been really beneficial, especially in one invoice. So they can allocate it to different departments. It doesn't have to, the costings don't have to go all to one department. So they can just go through. It's just been really getting time back and stuff like that. It's been really good. The support on hand obviously has been amazing. I don't have any bad things to say about the customer support that we receive. And like you were saying before, they're leaders in their field, which has been very beneficial for the clients. So.
I mean, we've started to mention, and you mentioned one there around, invoice detail, and I think a few other bits and pieces have come up throughout the conversation. Gary, can you speak? I mean, I think I'm assuming there's a bunch of people here listening who aren't necessarily familiar with any AP automation tools, and I think there's a lot of nitty-gritty detail in this space. It's not super high level. It's actually like, hey, we get granular. There's a lot of detail here, a lot of different things you can do, a lot of different outcomes you can achieve. So what are the core, I think maybe just to summarize where we've got to, I guess, what are the core benefits or what are the core outcomes that people should be thinking about, or that they should know that they can get out of implementing an AP automation tool, whether it's Lightyear or whether it's someone else in the market?
In general, yeah. Look, 5 years I've been doing this, talking to many people who have sort of from different degrees of, we're currently using this AP automation tool, but we're not happy with it, to those who are like, I've just started CFO of a group. There's this massive time waste around the paper AP process. I think high level, really, without getting into features and all of that, let's talk benefits, right? Now, Amy, you've like that, your hospo group, for example, no one's getting into that hospo group or any hospo group on a manager chef level, say, to punch invoices into a system or scribble on invoices that they're good to approve or whatever, right? I know that firsthand. I want to be on the floor, making money, flirting, like that's why you get, as a youngster, you get into that sort of game. As a business owner or a CFO or an outsourced Amy O'Connell sort of role, or a Liam, like to come in with an AP automation solution and go, hey, we're going to remove the paper from your desks, all of these pieces of paper that are going home in the kitchen hand's pocket, like that, all of that stuff that goes missing, it can remove all of that. We're going to get we're going to change your invoice approval from signing initials on a 10-page delivery to a single click. And then it's in the cloud anyway. So it's on Liam's desk or Amy's team's desk, like within a one single click. Like anyone in hospo, retail, any industry, like everyone's got the accounts payable problem. And anyone that's on this call, it's really just a question of like, yeah, maybe you are across that there's a better way of doing it. Maybe you're not. Maybe you're learning all of this today. But I think certainly, Jack, right at the top of the session, you said like people are busy doing the job, and actually they're busy living the pain of what apps like us can sort of solve, I think, you know. And it could be like, I just need a small data extraction tool without all the whiz bang enterprise stuff that like a Lightyear does. But still, like, you're still telling Chef, instead of scribbling on pieces of paper, it's like, take a picture and, you know, send it to this tool. Or ideally, where true automation shouldn't start with a piece of paper. Anyone that might have been at XeroCon last year, I hope you got one of our bags that said, if you start with paper, you end up with rubbish. Like, if you're going to do AP automation, we're obviously of the opinion we've built a big product that does it to a line item level and incredibly accurate. If you start with a piece of paper, it's not just rubbish data that you're going to get out of it, but it's a rubbish process. You're starting with a human at the beginning. That's not AP automation. You're falling at the first hurdle. Yeah, rubbish data, rubbish process, but also obviously the waste. Like, sure, the supplier might still staple a piece of paper with the parcel that's being delivered, but you're not beholden to that. Any one of the team across Amy's group's venues, like, they maybe have the piece of paper with the delivery, but it's already in Lightyear. It was in Lightyear before the goods were delivered. So they can just check off that everything's all right, but then shred it, burn it, eat it, whatever they want to do, right? And I think even the smallest of businesses, or a 90+ entity behemoth in any industry, like, AP automation's a go-to for anyone. My dogs are barking, so I'm going to go on mute now.
No, you're fine. You're fine. We've all been there. And I think that gives a nice overview of kind of some of the core outcomes. It'd be interesting to hear from anyone who is listening if your AP process is primarily still paper driven, because I think you're right. If that's still the case today, then there's absolutely better ways. If you've got more automation in your process than that, if you are maybe using OCR technology, or you're using an app or two to kind of get some of the way there, then it'd be good if you've got any questions for the team around where you want to go next. That'd be great to know as well. So we also want to make sure that as part of this conversation, we don't forget that Xero still has a limit. You know, it's not going to work for the largest, most complex businesses in the world. There's a reason why Woolworths is not going to be running their accounting through Xero. So what is the line in the sand? And I appreciate there is no specific, look, once you do this, then you should go ERP. It's a much more complex discussion than that. But what are those key elements that people need to be aware of to say, hey, or maybe from personal experience? I know, Gary, you guys integrate with ERP, so you probably have a bunch of customers or clients who are on them. What is the difference between those people who have said, hey, yep, it's time for an ERP, and those who have said, hey, we can make this work on Xero? What is that complexity that they weren't able to overcome? Or was it not complexity, it was something else? What is it that means ERP is the way to go? And so it's all good if your dog's still barking in the background.
No, they're good. I could be here all day telling you stories about this and conversations around, like, I've got one existing client at the moment that's moving to Xero, but it's not from an ERP as such, but this is a business that probably is ready for making that jump upwards to an ERP, because they need line item sort of inventory level reporting across 93 venues, I think it is. And that's not to say that reporting tools in this Xero ecosystem couldn't do that, right? But certainly I'd say anyone tracking inventory across call it 93 venues, or actually your Woolworths example, Jack, you've nailed it. Like that's a lot of stock across a lot of retail stores and a lot of scanning from open till close. That's a big operation, right? And for me, that's probably a good marker of where if the question is, you're right, it's not black and white, it is a gray area. But if somebody was maybe outgrowing Xero, it'd be at that point. If you're tracking, like you're not going to track inventory in Xero within Xero's inventory module across that many entities well, right? Otherwise, on the flip side, Jack, I've seen ERP system people move and they've binned the whole concept and they've moved back to Xero because these ERP systems, they can be a bit chunky and the user interface can be a bit unfriendly, potentially, where we all know, like I'm assuming everyone or anyone on this session is using Xero, let's be honest. And I think with the apps and the ecosystem, whether you're in Xero or you're in one of these apps, you find that the user interfaces are a bit more friendly, whether it's pushing a green button to approve an invoice in Lightyear or Mayday doing its thing at month end, right? They're a lot cleaner to deal with rather than an old school, even server-based ERP, you know, that you've had built yourself 20 years ago for your business and you've invested that much in it that you're not changing, right? They tend to be a bit clunkier and a bit less user-friendly, probably.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's where a lot of people find a lot of value is in the ease of use. You know, you bring somebody on board, the vast majority of people are going to know how to use Xero or pick it up quite quickly. But yeah, that element of once your business grows to a size where I guess there's probably a part of it, we need our accounting information and our operational information and our inventory information and, you know, all these different departments all in one location, all connected for whatever reason under, you know, a massive ERP, then that's where you draw the line, because Xero is never going to bring together and consolidate a whole bunch of operational data along with your accounting tools. There are add-ons that might be able to do some elements of it, but yeah, no, I think that's really good insight. I might actually throw Liam to you because there is a question in the chat. It's going back to an earlier point you made around that HubDoc is there as an OCR tool that is free, but you prefer Dext, and they've just asked, what do you see as the key benefits of Dext over HubDoc?
I think HubDoc as a tool is just clunky to use. There's a bunch of double entry that you need to do for no apparent reason. It's just a bit kind of messy in general. Dext has a bit of a cleaner workflow. I think the OCR is a little bit better. That they're probably the main things. I guess one's free, the other one's technically free until you work out how much time you're spending doing stuff on that.
I mean, do you think there's any element of, as you know, given you're working across a number of clients, that those efficiency gains that you're having for one then scale across, whereas for in-house team working just with their own stuff, that potentially they can get away with a HubDoc if it's free, and it's, you know, it's a bit of a, I'm just curious, I don't know if you have a take on that.
Yeah, I get what you mean, in terms of like we as a firm use certain tools and therefore are more efficient in those things. I think in this particular example, no, it's only good at like very small scale where you just want to like not pay for something because you're happy to spend more time doing so.
I hear that all the time, and I'm never going to badmouth another app in the ecosystem, right? But this is coming from a place of, hi, Gary, love to talk about Lightyear. We're currently doing this with such and such a tool too that Lisa's mentioned, but like, that's it. But the OCR as a technology it's never going to be perfect, right? It will always mistake an O for a 0 or an I for a 1 or something like that, right? And a lot of what I hear is, well, I'm paying for this tool or I'm using this free tool. That's then I then need to go and correct the mistakes that it's made. So I may as well have typed it incorrectly the first time myself. So what's the point of like subscribing to a tool like that? I'll swing it round to Lightyear. It's, well, yeah, 100% accurate line item detail that neither of those can give. It does all the coding for you to a line item level. and like no one's touching anything. Like the accounts payable, it goes straight to the end approving person, then it gets to accounts payable or Amy's team or however it's structured, right?
Yeah, no, great. Thanks, Gary. And I mean, given time, I might actually move on to kind of the final section, and as a reminder for anyone else who's still here, who's listening, who has any questions, chuck them in, because we'll have 5 minutes to answer anything. I guess as a final takeaway from the session, or a top tip or a piece of advice to anyone who's tuning in and saying, hey, they've logged into this because they're obviously on Xero or potentially looking at it, or concerned about its ability to grow with them. They're interested in AP because that's the automating AP topic. So what's a key kind of top tip, takeaway, piece of advice that you've got? I mean, Liam, if I can throw to you first, then Amy, I'll get your perspective, and finally, Gary, we can wrap it up there.
Yeah, I think like my thing would be that adding the invoice intake, the approvers and stuff doesn't necessarily change. Like it's not a massive change, because if you were previously doing it manually, it's not like you're shifting tech and having this huge kind of switch across. There might be a shift in mindset of what people are doing, but as Gary said before, rather than writing something down, sending it to an email address is not a huge change in like attitude. It ends up being much quicker, and people are, I guess, people enjoy doing that, just forwarding on an email or something, rather than having to think a bit more. So I guess it's not as big of a shift as it kind of seems if you were starting from a manual spot.
Yeah, cool. Awesome. Amy.
Yeah, so I think knowledge is power, education is power. So if you're unsure and you're trying to scale your business and you want to stay on Xero, reach out to the people who know. You know, like not one solution fits all businesses or all people or all clients and what they're looking for. So use the people who know, use the experts, use the account managers out there. Go to the things like Gary was saying before, XeroCon, walk around, get some ideas for your business and how you're trying to grow, and find the solution that actually fits for you and your business.
Awesome. Gary.
Well, I'm sure we've all heard the phrase, be the guy, always be the guy that ends the meeting early, right? I think it's the same with, if you are in your organization, or maybe you're on this session doing research like Amy would have at XeroCon last year, like be the one that knows about what's out there, stay up to date. What does this app do? Like we've all got like a 30-second summary video on every website, right? Or on the Xero marketplace. Like play in the Xero marketplace, read the reviews. It's all there. Like the end of the day, yes, always be the guy that ends the meeting early, but be the guy as well that solves pain, right? If again, it goes back to the Hospo group that Amy mentioned, like somebody at some point there went, this thing's really good. It's going to remove all of this wasted time, or checkbox, whatever the pain was, so that everyone in that organization can just focus on what they'd rather be doing. I think always be that person, and you'll come out looking golden. You feel good. You're helping, right? That's my top tip.
Absolutely. And I don't have a tip, but a key takeaway from the session today is just the sheer amount of time that some are spending in this area. Out of all of the topics, it seems that there's this potential for AP to take up days and days and days of the month end process. Just pure volume, paper, whatever it is that's causing that. And so just looking at it as, maybe we've got a little bit of pain here because we have to type something in from this document, but at the same time, think about that scale of challenge that you've got. If you're spending 3, 4, 5 days each month end, and it could be less than a couple hours, or it could be half a day even, like that's just huge gains for you and the team, and it enables people to be doing, I guess, more valuable, more interesting, more engaging work that's then going to add value moving forward. So yeah, absolutely. If you're someone who's spending that amount of time, or your finance team is spending that much time each month end, potentially there's some solutions out there that'll make life a little easier. Now, just before we wrap up, we got a question here from John, and so I'm happy for anyone to jump in if anyone has an answer. Are there any automations in the payment side, i.e., we're currently exporting the ABA from Xero and uploading to the bank for approval? So can we automate that?
I can probably comment on that. We use that, like the example I gave before, we were using Patreon. And I know they have some very large national businesses that are, I think some of them are listed, that run thousands of payments a month. And it can handle all that side. It can, if you've already got the invoice in Xero, it can pull it from there. So you don't need to use their kind of that flow if you don't want to. They have it as an option, so it's kind of an either or type thing.
Cool. Any other comments? No, all good. Cool. So I mean, potentially that's also where the topic we had yesterday on spend management and automating AP kind of cross over. So if you haven't checked out the spend management session yesterday, feel free to. It's also, it could be relevant for you there. Last question here. Are there any Xero user community groups on the likes of LinkedIn or Facebook that you can ask about Xero apps and tips and tricks, and etc.? I don't know if anyone's got any key ones that they refer to regularly.
There are a couple, Jack. I'm just trying to think of what they are, but if you go into Facebook and you type in Xero groups, it'll come up, and there's quite a few. There's some with experts in there. There's some with Xero account managers in there, and there's a few on Xero apps as well. So there are quite a few. Just search up Xero groups. Yeah.
I think the Xero Mastermind group is decent.
Yeah, that's
That probably has the most people in it, which is always helpful.
There's also, which I'm in, and I know Liam is as well, is the finance in tech community. It's a Slack group. So if you don't use Slack for work, that's fine. You can just have it on your phone or whatever. But that's I'd say that's a little bit more in-house finance team focused. So if you're a CFO, FD, FC, and you're in that space, there's a lot of technical accounting questions that go on in there, but then there's also the software side to that. So both good. I'm in both as well. Different audiences, different kinds of conversations, but both have a heavy, I suppose, touch on the Xero ecosystem quite regularly, which is great. Cool. Good question. So if there's any other questions, chuck them in. I'll just quickly run through the upcoming sessions before we wrap officially. So what's coming next? We've got executing complex HR and payroll, which will be a huge topic. Great. Liam's coming back for that one, which is good. We've then got next week enhancing multi-entity consolidations. If we're talking multi-entity businesses, if any of you are here, then that's obviously huge. And then we've got navigating and optimizing FX. So if you're a business that's dealing cross-border, cross-currency, whether or not you've got challenges in that space, feel free to jump on that. If you haven't registered, apacenterprise.cfotechstack.com. And I guess to that point, CFO Tech Stack, I haven't really called it out too much throughout the other sessions, but if you're not signed up to the newsletter, you can just go to cfotechstack.com. It's just content about building a great tech stack in your finance team. So if we're talking about communities, it's not so much a Facebook group or a LinkedIn community, but it's a newsletter that you'll get where finance leaders are going to share their tech stacks each week, those kinds of bits and pieces. So some really good value and interesting content that comes out of there. So thanks once again. The final question we had, which I think Liam's answered, was what was the Slack group? And that's just finance in tech, and there's a link in there for where to join. So if you're looking at the Q&A under the answered section, there's a link given there for joining that community. Cool. Unfortunately, Gary, I wasn't able to finish the meeting early, so I'm not that guy, but thanks everybody for your time. We've finished just on time, and yeah, thanks Liam, Gary, Amy for joining us, and thanks to everyone who came along.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
No worries. See ya.
Bye-bye.